Now is the time that our state lawmakers unite in a bipartisan, bicameral approach to fundamentally change the way we fund education to ensure that we are meeting the needs of all students and they reach their full potential. Thank you, and here is Teresa.
Thank you, Dr. Falk. Good morning. Thank you, Dr. Falk. My name is Teresa Weather O'Neill, and I am the superintendent of the Grand Rapids Public Schools, and I am truly proud to serve on the School Finance Research Collaborative. But I'm going to tell you just a little bit about our work. First, our diverse, broad-based, and bipartisan group of business leaders, education experts are from all corners of the state of Michigan, and we formed in 2016. And although we come from a variety of backgrounds, we all agree on one thing, and that is it's time to change the way Michigan schools are funded. With that in mind, we proudly supported Michigan's first comprehensive school adequacy study that answers one question: what does it cost to educate a child? This study was recently completed by the nation's top 2 school finance research firms to determine the true cost of educating a child. Odblink and Pickus, Palak and Associates, and Pickus, Odd and Associates. Our research team has over 100 years of combined experience and has been a major strength throughout this project. APA has conducted this type of research in all 50 states. To inform the study, our research team went directly to those on the front line: the teachers, the principals, special education directors, other educators who serve our students every day. Nearly 300 Michigan educators lent their expertise to this project. They served on panels on all grade levels: preschool, special education, English language learners, poverty, and career and technical education. The study included a first-of-its-kind panel on charter schools and additional panels on districts of varying sizes, geographically isolated districts, and at-risk students. Michigan now joins more than 30 states that have conducted comprehensive adequacy studies over the past 15 years. This study provides a roadmap to fixing Michigan's broken funding system. And to tell you more about the report and the findings, I'd like to welcome Ron Kaler, Assistant Superintendent of Organizational and Community Initiatives for the Kent Intermediate School District.
Thank you, Teresa. And thank all of you for being here today. My name is Ron Kaler, and I'm Assistant Superintendent at Kent ISD, and I'm here because I've had the great opportunity to work directly with the researchers and the team at Oakland ISD that's been working on organizing this work. Kent ISD, as you probably know, is a service agency for the public, private, and charter schools, serving 120,000 students throughout the region and preparing them for college and careers. My job is largely to bring together school, business, community, and philanthropic leaders together to improve education across the region and better prepare students to succeed and to build the economy and make West Michigan a great place to build a business and to grow a family. This report answers a fundamental question all of our community partners have about education. Most of you think it's about money. It's not. It's about children. The schools, our business partners, and philanthropic organizations I work with every day are less concerned about the money than they are about the supports and resources necessary to help children succeed. That is what this report details through credible research. It identifies the human and financial resources necessary to help all children meet Michigan standards. Do any of you who are here today have children in our schools or grandchildren? Raise your hand. Thanks. I figured you probably did. You know, I had my first grandchild, my first grandson, started kindergarten this year in the Pleasant Ridge schools, just outside of Detroit. And what we want for our children and our grandchildren in school is the same thing we'd want for them if they suffered a catastrophic injury or illness and were taken to the hospital. At that moment, if we were asked by a doctor, what do you want for your child? Your response would be simple, whatever it takes. You should want the same for your child, for all of our children, because their education is that important. For most, it truly is the difference between a life of opportunities and possibilities or a life of struggling to put food on the table and to support a family. When policymakers adopted the Michigan Merit Curriculum and the Michigan Merit Exam, we were told that it was necessary to prepare students for the jobs of the 21st century and to make Michigan a leader on the world stage. They implemented the standards and the accountability measures, but they didn't ask Dr. Rice or Teresa Neal, what would it take financially to help all of your students achieve these standards? This study does that. It asks and answers the question of what it takes to educate a student to Michigan standards. 9 of the top 10 performing states in education across the country spend more on education than we do here in Michigan. So it should be no surprise that this report suggests that we need more money per pupil. Here are a few things you need to know about this report. First, it costs a minimum of $9,590 per pupil to educate a regular education K-12 student in Michigan. That's regardless of the student's location, income, learning challenges, or other circumstances. That doesn't include transportation, food service, or capital cost. It does include the regular cost of the pension, which is 4.6%. That would also correlate to what a charter school would pay for a 401k for their staff. Second, charter and traditional schools should be funded equally. This would be the most equitable way going forward. We have more than 10% of the students in our state who are attending charter schools, and we want for all students what we want for our own child. Third, it costs $14,155 to educate a preschool student at the ages of 3 or 4. The report concluded that to best educate our youngest students, we should make preschool for all children a goal. It also concluded that very high quality programming is necessary for us to realize the return on that investment that we all expect. The study finds an additional percentage of base cost should be provided for special education, for English language learners, for economically disadvantaged, and for students in a facility like this who are taking career and technical education programming. Weighted funding is recommended to reflect the additional resources and adult assistance that's necessary to help all children meet our academic expectations. The report recommends the state assume the responsibility for fulfilling the needs of the most severely impaired special education students. Fifth, transportation costs should be funded at $973 per pupil until further, actually per rider, until further study can be carried out. I think you all know that transportation and needs and costs vary across the state. Districts with larger transportation expenditures divert dollars from the classroom to get students to that classroom. You needn't look any further than Kent County to see where that result. You have districts like Rockford that have well more than 100 square miles, and then you have a district like Godfrey Lee that has 1 square mile. Finally, funded should be adjusted to reflect the huge variance in the size of districts across Michigan. Size matters. Larger districts can create economies of scale that are not possible in smaller schools. Smaller districts with fewer students incur greater charges per student as a result. The study examines how cost differentials can be applied to account for this effect. Determining the total cost of implementing all of these recommendations will now begin. Looking to the future, the research team suggests additional study on capital costs for traditional and charter schools, and determining potentially additional weighting for students who live in high concentrations of poverty, high concentrations of economic diversity. We're not going to come up with this money tomorrow, but we must take these results and work with them as we discuss with our parents, our communities, and our policymakers what we want and need for our children. Our children deserve that. The people who love Michigan and the idea of restoring this state to the economic powerhouse it once was deserve that. To tell you more about how the report provides a framework for serving students in rural and remote areas, please welcome Dr. Lori Tubergen-Clark, Superintendent of Newaygo County RESA. I'm sorry.
Well, Kent isn't quite as rural as Newaygo County. My name is Lori Tubergen-Clark. I am the superintendent for Newaygo County RESA, which is like an hour or so north of here. I've lived there my whole life. I've spent my entire career there as an educator and know firsthand the importance of preparing particularly our rural students for jobs and success. Many of our students attend school in geographic isolated areas, and that's many of our students across Michigan, similar to Newaygo County, and they have little to no access to major highways or major thoroughfares. That can make it extremely expensive to transport our students to school. One example from my county is we have a district that spends $1,300 per student to get their kids back and forth to school. I have another local district that picks up an average of one student every 4.5 miles. So if those transportation costs require money to be taken from our classrooms, that means there are fewer 21st century learning tools that can prepare our students for the bright and prosperous future that they deserve too. With that in mind, this report calls for an additional study that will actually design a more specific transportation cost formula. The current cookie-cutter approach to school funding doesn't recognize the greater expense of educating students in very small and very rural districts. This study recommends a further funding adjustment of approximately $1,892 per student for the very smallest districts. That's a critical figure because there are 196 districts with fewer than 1,000 students in them. And there's another 210 districts with enrollment between 1,000 and 3,000 students. So there's a lot of small rural districts in Michigan that we need to keep in mind. And the study calls for additional funding for geographically isolated districts due to the extra cost challenges that they face. And to tell you a little bit more about the new vision for preschool, please welcome Dr. Michael Rice, Kalamazoo Public Schools.
Thank you, Dr. Clark. Good morning, everyone. My name is Michael Rice, and I'm a member of the Steering and Technical Committee of the School Finance Research Collaborative and the superintendent of the Kalamazoo Public Schools at 13,000 students, the second largest district on the west side of the state. Let me share 4 aspects of this important new study. First, the study calls for funding high-quality early childhood education for our 4-year-old youngsters. High-quality early childhood education is research-based and needs to be fully and completely funded in the state of Michigan. Second, the study begins to address more clearly and accurately the costs to educate poor children, both as individuals and in substantial concentrations. The report also calls for additional study regarding the costs associated with poor students with particularly high needs. Third, the study provides a system for funding the education of a wide range of special needs children, mild, moderate, and severe, children whose educational and other needs can be profoundly greater and whose educational costs more as a result. Fourth, the education study develops a mechanism for funding the education of English language learners, a population of students that Michigan virtually completely ignores in its state funding system. But for a Michigan state funding formula that largely treats all children the same, it almost goes without saying. Different children come with different needs, and those different needs have different costs. It was Oscar Wilde, the great English playwright, who once defined a cynic as someone who knows the cost of everything, the value of nothing. We discussed today investments into the education of children, not simply expenses. The difference in investment pays a dividend, in this case measured in better educated children, a more productive workforce, and a higher quality of life. To tell you a little more about what comes next, please welcome Elizabeth Welch, the Vice President of the East Grand Rapids Public Schools Board of Education. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rice. It's really a privilege to be here and be standing up here with these amazing public servants. My name is Elizabeth Welch. I am a proud member of the East Grand Rapids Public School Board and a proud member of the greater community. I've had the privilege of working with parents all across West Michigan and really the state who really just want the best for their children and to get the proper supports that they need. And obviously, as the study has shown, that is not happening right now, but it can. I'm also an attorney in the area and have firsthand knowledge about top-notch pre-K-12 education settings, and also know about areas where there are struggles. So I think I bring an interesting perspective to the table. As you've heard today, the School Finance Research Collaborative report provides a bold vision of how we fund our schools. With this critical information, we now know the true cost of what it really costs to educate a student in the state of Michigan. So what next? Michigan policymakers now have the most comprehensive research on school adequacy funding available, providing the building blocks for a school new funding formula. This is not based on politics. It's based completely on evidence and studies from all over the country. This work has been done before, and now Michigan is the beneficiary of that same kind of work. The world has changed dramatically since our funding system was put in place in 1994. And our funding system has to reflect those changes. Right now, we rank at the bottom in student performance nationwide, and the reality is it was not always so. We were a proud leader in the nation. Under our current obsolete approach to school funding, our kids will only fall further behind. It's time for a new system that addresses the wide-ranging needs of all students in our state. Our research team was asked to provide the building blocks of a school funding formula, and they have indeed accomplished that in Michigan. Now it's up to policymakers to take action and find solutions. We hope that will involve our researchers. We hope they will involve our researchers in this next step. And we thank you for joining us today. We are very appreciative of your interest. We think a lot of people are going to be really, really interested in the report. It's long. Chapter 9 has everything you need to know. And it really is. It has amazing, for those of us up here, this is wonky education stuff, but it's really, really interesting stuff, and it's really, really important data-driven information that you can get to pretty quickly. So thanks for joining us today. Ron Kaler is going to be sticking around to field questions, and more information and the collaborative report is available at fundmyschools.org, my being M-I, as in Michigan. Thank you, everybody.
And I think at this moment, we will take some questions.
Sure.
So and if you have a question for a specific person, just let us know.
Well, there's, a lot of people have said, well, to what end? I think we're already seeing the state report, the Michigan Finance Study that was released in June of 2016. It was somewhat inadequate to the task because it was a successful school district study, and really it found that the districts that were best situated in terms of the most wealthier districts and economically advantaged families perform better. We understand that. But after that study, the legislature and the governor's office recommended more money for at-risk students in 31A. They also, this past year, did start investing a little bit in English language learning support, and they did so on a basis that reflects the type of funding that we would like to see here. So that's a start. And, I think we hope that we know that it's a little late in the game to totally, change what the governor's going to recommend in a couple weeks. But we can influence the discussion, and we hope that we have some serious dialogue about what it really takes and the research that we have here. Well, I think it's clear that we need to recognize the different abilities and different needs of students. Lieutenant Governor Calley and the report that was presented to him found that we're underfunding special education by nearly $700 million. It found the impact across the state was about $453 per pupil. So that means that's $453 per pupil that could have provided supports for students who are struggling at early literacy, who are having difficult times meeting math requirements, that they're not receiving because we're paying for the mandated costs. And so our special education students receive first dollar. They should, but all students should benefit from that.
Superintendent, do you want to add something?
I do. You know, I think it's important that we recognize that the needs of individual districts may be different across the state. So you take Grand Rapids Public Schools. We serve students with disabilities. For the county, that's one. We also serve a large population of students that speak a different language. It takes a different amount. Instead of $1 amount coming into the district to serve every student the exact same, right? We know this. We know students from poor families, low-income families. We need more. We're up to the task, but you can't take the same dollar amount and think that that is going to serve every single student. We are here at Innovation Central High. This is one of our career tech centers. We have students from across the district coming here. We get the same dollar amount for every child. This is what we want in the state of Michigan, right? We want to create opportunities in order for us to become the best state. It takes extra resources, right? We have 5 different programs here. Some children are from families with resources, but then there are others that we have to offer the education plus, and to get the same dollar amount, it doesn't work.
In Kalamazoo Public Schools, we have 1,000 English language learners. The state gives us $70,000 for their education. That's $70 per English language learner. You think about that. But 140 youngsters in the last year and a half who have come from other countries. They are refugees. We appreciate the honor and responsibility of educating them. The state of Michigan gave us precisely no money to educate them. It is an outrage. To the issue of special education, if special education, which is a federal mandate, is underfunded in the state of Michigan, according to the Lieutenant Governor in his study, by $700 million, imagine the underfunding of general education students whose education isn't federally mandated and protected.
And I just sort of getting back to your question about what would rise to the top. For me, it would be please just use the data to make decisions. I mean, that ultimately, there's this amazing tool now that's available. So when making funding decisions, be smart about it. You've got data at your fingertips now that can help inform that. And it's interesting because the prior study was sort of successful school district model, and I'm in one of those school districts. I represent one of those school districts. I'm very proud of that. But I want to make it clear that we have a school foundation that has propped up reading support, a guidance counselor, essential things that all go to the success of our children. We were able to do that because of our amazing community. I fully recognize, standing here today, the majority of communities cannot do that. I genuinely want every student to have those supports. And even in our district, we've still cut a ton. So, you know, reading supports are different across districts than they were 10 years ago, right, as we have this 3rd grade reading bill. So we want our children to be successful. Nobody wants that more than anyone here, but please just rely on the data so that we can make smart decisions.
I want to add, though, when we talk about relying on the data, you guys, this is bipartisan. This isn't one group of people that said this is what we need and we're just after money. That isn't it. We are about educating children and becoming the best state, the top state. When you take a group of people together, Elizabeth talked about East Grand Rapids. I'm in Grand Rapids. Her children, the children in East Grand Rapids, they have a need just like I have in Grand Rapids. And so this isn't pitting one district against another or a charter school against a traditional public school. That isn't it. It's a group of people that came together to say, this is what we need for the children in the state of Michigan. And I think that's important. So not only look at the data, but look at where that came from, right?
I think we just have to set some of those things aside that we've looked at over the years. And we don't talk in this report, the researchers don't talk in this report about where the revenue is coming from. What they talk about is the individual student needs. And those needs in the charter schools are similar to the needs in traditional schools. They do have, cost burdens different in different ways. But I think the researchers recommend that we continue to look at the capital expenditures and the impact of that. We need further study on that. Obviously, they recommended further look at transportation and call out transportation at $973 per pupil. And we didn't look at the unfunded liability of the pension system. We did that on purpose because in most states, that pension system, if it's a state pension system as this one is, we don't bargain it at the local bargaining table, then the state looks at that expenditure in a different way. It segregates that from the actual cost of educating a student. And so I think we do that here. So, absolutely. I mean, this is a building block. It's a roadmap to the future, to a dialogue about where do we go. It just focused on the cost. It's the responsibility of the policymakers and actually all of us to have the dialogue with our community about how do we fully fund this now. Proposal A, when it was adopted, it didn't come as a discussion about education funding needs. It was a result of a property tax revolt across the state. And it was cobbled together to match the amount that each community across the state was spending on education. And the dollar amounts that we have here reflect the dollar amount that would be gathered from all sources, local, state, and federal. And so that's our job now, is to step back and say, what is a roadmap to getting there? How do we use this to create a new system, an equitable system that uses all sources of money to accomplish this goal?
One thing we do well in Grand Rapids and across the state is we collaborate. We need to take this study now and give it life. We need to meet with the governor. We need to meet with legislators. We need to meet with community members. This is a group of people from across the state, and we need to come together to collaborate, to share the information. This is the beginning of the conversation. But in order to do that, we need to get in a room and hold conversations and literally bring this document to life. This is about our children, and we can do it. We can do it, but it starts with a conversation. We need to share the information that we have and give others the opportunity to push and ask questions. We've wrestled with this for the past year. Now it's time for us to meet with others so that they can join this mission of educating all children.
There are a couple things for that, but probably the couple different answers. Stability in terms of accountability standards and expectations is a big part of that. But the best example is probably Massachusetts when Mitt Romney was the governor. And they recognized that they needed, if they were going to really be the state they wanted to be, they needed to invest in education. And so it was the business community working with policymakers that set a path that they've stayed on since those times in the early 1990s. And so it really, as Teresa said, does require a dialogue among the business community, our educators, and our policymakers. And I think it's also important, as Teresa said, people came together. Well, the charge here was led by the Kellogg Foundation, Skillman Foundation, the Mott Foundation. It wasn't a group of educators who got together and say, hey, what can we do to gin up something that will create more money for us? It was the foundations who see the results of the inadequate funding system and inequitable funding system we had. And those foundations who have nothing but the best interest of our state at heart said, what can we do to address this issue and better inform the dialogue? Because right now, it looks like adults fighting with adults about money. And we need to better define what it truly costs to meet these standards and then chart a roadmap to getting there.
Dr. Rice, you wanted to weigh in?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, it isn't all about money, but that it's not all about money is different from that it is not at all about money. It most assuredly is in part about money. You can't educate children without money. Every additional dollar does not necessarily generate higher student achievement. However, there are a number of research-based reforms that do drive higher student achievement. Early childhood education has more than a 50-year research base. Full-day kindergarten has a research base behind it. Small class size reduction, K-3, assuming you do something different with the smaller size classes, has a research base. The same is true as you move up into upper L and into middle school as well. But you have to do something with the lower classes. You can't simply do the same thing with smaller and expect to get better out of children. All of those have substantial research bases, as do a number of other educational reforms. So simply adding more money does not necessarily improve student achievement, but if you add money in research-based areas, you are going to drive higher student achievement, and that's what this study is about.